5 spine-chilling haunted tales from truckers. Unexplained terrors revealed on the sinister radius. The night swallowed Jake whole as he rumbled through the desolate stretch of Highway 66. Shadows danced in the flickering glow of his headlights, player piano music from an unseen source echoing in the silence. Tales of phantom truckers lingered in his mind. Warped warnings from fellow drivers whispered over countless diner meals. With every tire on the cracked asphalt, he could feel the weight of those stories' lost souls lurking behind the veil of the asphalt, waiting for the unsuspecting as dusk settled. He found himself in the ghost town of Black Hollow. Words of caution clenched tightly in his gut like a heavy chain. He pulled over when he spotted a hitchhiker on the roadside. A scruffy man with wild, sunken eyes and a gaze that could peel paint off walls. Picked up by the sheriff, he said, voice like gravel, and then tossed aside like yesterday's trash. Jake's instincts raised alarms. As they cruised along, the hitchhiker spun tales of roadblocks and distant, flickering lights betraying drivers into nightmarish detours. You ever heard of lost truckers? He asked, his voice dripping shadows. Jake laughed nervously, gripping the wheel tighter. Can't say I have, he lied, visions of his wife and spirited daughter invading his thoughts, their faces urging him to stay safe. Suddenly, the GPS flickered and died, plunging them into the void of uncertainty. Before he could resist, the hitchhiker urged him down a gravel road toward a diner, the kind of place written off by time itself. The flickering neon sign buzzed eerily, almost mocking. Inside, the waitress barely acknowledged him, her vacant stare filled with the weight of desolation. Panic clawed at Jake's throat as the hitchhiker leaned in closer, breath like a foul storm. And then it hit him. The hitchhiker revealed details about his family no stranger should know. Your daughter wants to spread her wings, he whispered, a sly grin curling at the corners of his mouth. Jake's heart raced, each beat pounding a message of impending doom. Felt like the walls of the diner were closing in. As they drove on, shadows of ghostly figures began to emerge by the roadside, their distorted faces stretching into grotesque masks, matching the hitchhiker's twisted tales. Each mile cranked his anxiety into overdrive, empty echoes from the lost truckers whispering in his ears, warning him of unspeakable horrors ahead. The hitchhiker's laughter morphed into an unsettling cacophony that reverberated through his thoughts, a chilling reminder that no distance could shield him from the darkness lurking in his own backyard. Time to confront the truth, the hitchhiker suggested, and the air thickened with dread. Jake felt paralyzed, his pulse racing as flashes of his family danced through his mind. What if it was all too late? He needed to escape this surreal nightmare. Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system, and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. As dawn broke, the outlines of a forsaken rest stop flickered in the distance, the sign swinging like a pendulum of fate. Heart-thudding, Jake made his split-second decision. He had to break free, to escape the tightening grip of phantom threats and salvage what was left of his sanity. But as shadows loomed closer, the road ahead twisted into a treacherous fork, leaving him wondering. In a race against time, would there be any hope when threats materialized from his own cracked reality? Jake's hands shook as he gripped the wheel tighter, sweat beading on his forehead. The rest stop loomed closer, a dilapidated structure that appeared to sag under the weight of its own bitterness. Tall weeds jutted out from cracked pavement, as if nature itself was trying to reclaim the forsaken place. He glanced at the hitchhiker, who sat silent but watchful, a predator clinging to its prey. Pull in, the hitchhiker urged suddenly, his tone low and gravelly. We need to talk. Against all instincts, Jake guided the truck toward the rest area, his heart racing with each rolling tire. As he parked, the silence engulfed him like thick smoke. The rest stop sign, the letters peeling and faded, seemed to leer in the dim morning light. He wondered what passengers had stopped here, what lives had been altered in the blink of an eye. "Get out," the hitchhiker ordered, eyes gleaming with a wicked anticipation. A knot twisted in Jake's stomach, but against the urge to flee, he stepped outside into the damp chill. The air smelled stale, laced with something rotten that made him gag. "Do you see them?" The hitchhiker gestured wildly toward the tree line beyond the stop. "They're everywhere, watching." Jake squinted into the shadows. First, nothing stirred. But then he noticed the barely visible shapes lurking within the tree's hunched figures, half-seen faces twisted with agony. His breath hitched, a visceral panic spreading through him. "Please, let us just go," Jake pleaded, backing away cautiously. But the hitchhiker stepped closer, a smug grin twisting across his face. "Don't you want to know? Know what happened to them?" The hitchhiker shifted, his body language suddenly menacing. "They made the same choice you're facing now." Jake felt the weight of the choice press down on him, suffocating. What lay beyond the trees? What would happen if he ignored this man's twisted invitation? The forgotten souls of Black Hollow whispered in the wind, their cries cutting through the oppressive silence. "Your family, they're at risk. Don't you care?" The hitchhiker's voice dropped to a taunting whisper. "You know what they say about truckers, they all come to ruin here." Nothing made sense anymore. The tales he dismissed before gnawed at his mind like angry rats. His heart sunk deeper as the realization stole his breath. The fate of each lost trucker echoed within his very soul. "No!" Jake shouted, an involuntary reaction that seemed to wake the shadows. They shifted, swaying closer as if beckoning him. "I won't let you control me." In that instant, something shifted within him. He turned, desperate to get back into the truck, to escape the specter of this nightmare. But as he stumbled back, cold hands seized him, grasping fingers slid under his skin, deep into his warmth, squeezing him like a vice. He gasped, whirling around to pry free, but the hitchhiker was suddenly gone, replaced by a swarm of twisted images flaring in a chaotic dance. "Run, Jake, run," echoed through his mind, but his legs felt paralyzed, stuck in a horror-induced tar pit. The figures from the trees poured out, their faces now clear, hardened shells of torment, mouths stretched in silent screams. Each step they took sent chills racing down Jake's spine, visions of his wife and daughter flashing before him. He had to escape, but escape to what? With a surge of adrenaline, he broke free from their grasp and dashed toward the truck. The weight felt heavier now, the shadows closing in fast. As he fumbled for the door, headlights flickered further down the road, beckoning him. But as he finally swung himself inside, the hitchhiker appeared in the rearview mirror, eyes glinting with malevolence. "It's too late," he whispered, voice slithering into the confined space like poison. What twisted game had he entered? Jake stepped on the gas, but the road ahead twisted and turned into a labyrinth of shadows. In the corners of his vision, he saw more figures crawling out, drawn to him like moths to a flame. And in that moment, he understood that the only way out was through the darkness that threatened to engulf him whole. He hadn't just picked up a hitchhiker. He had unleashed something insatiable that would stop at nothing. As he barreled down the fractured highway, desperation surged through him. He needed answers. What awaited him on the other side of this nightmare? The din of laughter echoed once more, and doubt sank deep into his heart. Who was the real monster here? Would he survive, or had the road claimed him already? He pressed the throttle, determined to find a way out. But the whispers turned frantic, promising new horrors just over the horizon, and Jake could feel them coming. The truck roared down the asphalt, the engine's growl drowning out the surreal whispers that taunted Jake from the shadows. Each passing tree seemed to reach out with grasping branches, pulling him deeper into the unknown. He flicked the radio on, hoping to drown out the sense of dread gnawing at his insides. Static crackled, sharp and biting. Then just for a heartbeat he heard a voice. "Jake, help us!" His blood turned to ice. He slammed the volume down, trying to block out the frantic calls that echoed in the silence of his mind. The figures flitted in and out of his vision, laughing now, a cacophony of unhinged joy and despair. The road twisted in eerie ways that made him question everything. Was he driving? Or were they moving him? Stay focused. Keep your eyes on the road. He gripped the wheel like it was a lifeline, but it felt slippery beneath his sweating palms. A sudden bump jolted the truck, sending Jake's heart into his throat. He swerved, the tires screeching against the pavement. Was it a ghostly hand? Or just a piece of debris? He dared a glance into the rearview mirror. The hitchhiker was gone, but not far. Shadows danced in the truck's wake, writhing like a living thing. But where were they going? If he didn't T-stop, would he ever get away? With a gut-wrenching lurch, he pulled over on the side of the road, gravel crunching beneath the tires. The forest loomed just a few feet from him, dark and inviting, as if begging him to surrender. "What do I do?" he muttered. "What do I do?" His phone buzzed in the pocket of his jeans. Relief washed over him like cool water as he fished it out, praying for a signal, some connection to reality. The screen lit up. No bars. Panic crawled back into his chest. Nausea twisted his stomach. Then he noticed a figure at the edge of the tree line. Not the hitchhiker, but another shadow. Taller, broader. It moved with a slow, deliberate grace that chilled him to the bone. Jake felt sweat trickle down the back of his neck. He wanted to close the truck door, lock it up tight, but it felt like a flimsy barrier against whatever haunted the forest. "Help us," the voice from the radio echoed again, now coming from somewhere in the back seat. A pounding in his skull crescendoed into a chant, merging with the whispers that continued to claw at him. His fingers trembled like leaves in a storm as he fumbled for the door handle. The urge to flee pulled at him, but he couldn't leave the truck. The world outside felt like a thick fog wrapped around him, and every shadow looked hungry. As if sensing his turmoil, the figure stepped forward, revealing a face twisted in anguish, eyes wide and reflecting sheer terror. Jake was rooted to his seat, mouth dry. Words failed him as the creature's gaze locked onto his. Suddenly, a horrific screech echoed from the woods, piercing the silence, the sound of metal tearing through flesh. Jake recoiled, heart racing as the ominous wails intensified, melding with the cries of the damned. He had to make a choice. The door swung open, his body moved without conscious thought, and he stumbled out into the dark grip of the woods. The air thickened, wrapping around him like a shroud. What awaited him in the darkness? Would he find help? Or the reason behind the torment of those lost souls? Jake! The name echoed through the trees, a haunting chorus of fear and despair. The shadows whispered promises that curled like smoke around his thoughts. What unholy truth was he about to face? As he stepped deeper into the gloom, a flicker of hope arrived, a glimpse of light somewhere ahead. But was it real? His heart pounded as he took one step toward the light, unsure what fate awaited him. Would he embrace the truth, or was he merely stepping further into the abyss? The weight of shadows loomed behind him, and he could almost hear their laughter, calling him back to the truck. But he knew he had to move forward. A sinister game had been set in motion, and now it was time to discover the rules, or be trapped forever. The light flickered like a dying star, taunting Jake as he drew closer. It filtered through the branches, casting ghostly patterns on the ground, whispering promises of safety. Yet beneath that glow lurked the question, was it a beacon or a trap? Shadows huddled close, as if they were waiting for him to step into their dark embrace. A chill ran down his spine as he moved forward, cautiously tugging at the frayed edges of his courage. The air felt electric, alive with a malevolence that shook him to his core. "Stay calm, stay calm," he muttered under his breath, but the forest seemed to drown out even his voice. Suddenly, sharp laughter echoed around him, echoing like broken glass cutting through silence. He stopped dead in his tracks. "Who's there?" he shouted, his voice cracking. The shadows recoiled for a moment, then surged forward, coiling around him, pushing him further into the depths of the woods that in the distance. The light pulsed, and he squeezed his eyes shut, half expecting it to vanish. But no, it remained, a cruel promise dangling just out of reach. With 2 deep breaths, he pressed onward, driven by a desperate need to uncover what lay beyond. The crunch of twigs underfoot punctuated the silence, each step a coffin nail in the sound of the night. Sweat dripped down his brow, pooling at the nape of his neck. He could feel them, the whispers wrapping around him, tugging at his sanity with icy fingers. "Help us," they sang, their voices merging into a haunting symphony. "Shut up! Shut up!" he screamed, pressing his palms against his ears to block out the torment. But the more he tried to silence them, the louder they became, swelling like a tidal wave ready to crash. And then he saw her, a glimpse of white, a spectral figure standing just beyond the light. She was blurry, like a reflection on water, yet there was something familiar. His heart skipped. Was it someone he knew? Someone he had lost? "Jake!" she called again, and this time the voice held a note of urgency, a desperate appeal that pierced through the chaos. His heart raced as he stumbled towards her, each step pulling him deeper into the chasm of despair. "Please help us," she cried out, extending a hand, fingers trembling like leaves in a storm. Jake could feel his resolve wavering, pulled in by the intensity in her eyes. But behind her, lurking in the darkness, shadows twisted and writhed, morphing into shapes that loomed ever closer. "Don't trust her," a voice hissed from the trees. It was a low growl, warped and malevolent. Jake turned, confusion flooding him. "Run," the voice urged, thick with panic. He hesitated, glancing between the figure and the growing shapes, fear gripping him. He was caught, trapped in a web of conflicting realities, hope versus despair. And then it began. The ground trembled beneath him. A low, rumbling growl emerged from the depths of darkness. Something ancient and vicious, awakening, demanding sacrifice. Jake felt the forest hold its breath. With instinct overpowering thought, he turned and ran, weaving through thick trunks and gnarled branches as the laughter erupted again, this time darker, more mocking, like a chorus of the damned. Laughter surged from all sides, a cacophony of voices that begged him to stop, to turn back. But he couldn't. He wouldn't. Then he tripped, falling to the forest floor, his palms slapping against the damp earth. Desperation clawed at him as he scrambled to his feet. The light still glowed ahead. It had to lead him out. Vital grace teetered on the edge as he darted toward it, not knowing if it was salvation or a portal to hell. As he stumbled toward the fading brightness, Jake screamed out into the swirling shadows, "What do you want from me?" But the answer came in a collective whisper, a chilling promise that stitched itself into the fabric of his thoughts, tightening like a noose. The shadows surged forward, and the ground beneath him began to shift. Would he escape this nightmare, or would the forest claim him as its own? The whispers grew louder, and then everything fell into an eerie silence. Ahead, the light flickered one last time before winking out into darkness. What lay ahead in that void, waiting for him? Jake stumbled into the veil of darkness, uncertainty wrapping around him like an unwanted shroud. His heart thudded against his ribs, a frantic war drum urging him to flee. Yet all he could hear was the unsettling silence, a silence so deep it felt alive, alive and hungry. He blinked, attempting to let his eyes adjust to the void, but the forest swallowed every bit of light left. Panic coiled in his throat. Where was the way out? The laughter had ceased, replaced by an oppressive quiet that pressed against him, filled with sinister promises etched in shadow. He inhaled sharply, catching a whiff of something metallic in the air, a smell like rust or blood. A cold knot of fear twisted in his stomach. "Anyone?" he croaked, the word barely breaking the stillness. At first, silence answered him, but then it came, a rustle, a crackling sound deep within the woods. Something moved out there. He strained to listen, his heart pounding in time with the growing dread. "Stop playing games," he shouted, voice hoarse and shaky. But it didn't matter. He was alone now, alone with whatever lurked just beyond reach. Then the whispers returned, but this time they were different. "Turn back, you don't belong," they coiled around his ankles, pulling him down, inviting him to stay. Shadows darted around him, flashing and flickering like bad memories he'd rather forget. He could almost make out faces in the dimness, twisted expressions of agony and malice, eyes glinting with disdain. "Get away from me," Jake yelled, shaking his head violently as if that would erase them. But the more he fought, the stronger their grip became, the more his fear fed their sinister energies. Through the shifting shadows he staggered forward, mind racing. Was there not a path or something guiding him? He had to move, just keep moving. Every nerve in his body screamed as he forced himself deeper into the forest, past the reach of those insidious whispers. He had to break free. But with every step, the trees closed in tighter, branches snagging at his clothes and tugging him backward as if trying to warn him. Or maybe warning the dark things that prowled within. Then a flash, he caught sight of something. Glowing eyes amid the thick darkness, too close, just beyond the trees. Frozen, he stared back, unable to breathe. They seemed to study him, hungry and knowing, a promise of death reflected in their depths. The ground beneath him trembled again, the very earth threatening to consume him. And then it spoke, a voice like gravel scraping against glass, low and dripping with menace. He who steps forward must face the price. The darkness demands you pay price? What price? Jake stammered, backing up, his pulse racing. I just want to leave. A cackling laughter erupted around him, rising like smoke. You could have turned back, but now it's too late. Suddenly, darkness surged, retreating and then crashing against him like a wave. Jake stumbled, his feet slipping. He was losing grip on reality. The world spinning, shadows reaching out hungrily, fingers of gloom snagging him and pulling him under. He screamed, but his voice was lost in the cacophony of laughter, echoes mingling with the whispers demanding his surrender. In that dreadful moment of chaos, the world blurred, and he realized every choice had led to this expanse of terror. He could see only darkness, hear only madness, feel only despair. No escape. Was the light a mirage, a deception meant to lead him astray? And then, just when he thought he might drown in the abyss, he felt a shift. Something unseen in the depths stirred. A presence, ancient and terrible, awakening from its slumber. As he tumbled into the shadowy void, the last thing he heard was the voice that had called to him, an echo of dread that sent chills running through his already fraying sanity. You're ours now. In the pitch blackness, a new fear ignited within him. What awaited him at the end of this dark journey? What sacrifices had been demanded, and what would he become in this cursed eternity? The answer loomed just outside his reach, waiting. The darkness consumed him, undulating like a living thing, and Jake felt the weight of dread pressing against his chest. He was no longer just lost. He was sliding into something he couldn't comprehend. The air crackled with anticipation, as if the forest itself were holding its breath, waiting for his next move. He landed hard on the ground, the fall knocking the wind from his lungs. He gasped for breath, the chill of the earth seeping through him. The laughter had faded, but a new sound emerged from the depths, a low chant that filled the air with a palpable terror. Join us, it beckoned, the voices weaving together like a tainted lullaby. Desperately, he tried to push himself up, but the earth felt alive, writhing beneath him, trying to pull him down. He locked his eyes onto the glowing orbs now circling him. There were more of them, each pair glinting in the dark, echoing the laughter that had haunted him moments before. They closed in, slowly but purposefully, like predators savoring a chase. Get away, Jake shouted, the command laced with desperation. But it only seemed to amuse them, drawing forth more whispers. The shadows thickened, swirling around him like a storm, and for a moment, he thought he saw faces emerge, twisted and contorted, mouths moving, releasing muffled screams that echoed in his mind. He staggered backward, instinct kicking in as he scrambled to his feet. His mind raced for a way out, a path through this nightmare. Suddenly, the ground shifted, and a wave of dread swept over him when he noticed something beneath the earth. A series of gnarled roots stretching out like fingers, clawing at his ankles. Run, you fool! He urged himself, breaking into a sprint, dodging the branches reaching out as he tore through the thicket. His heart roared in his ears, desperation fueling him. Each step felt heavier, as if the darkness clutched at him, trying to drag him back. But the chanting grew louder, drowning out his thoughts. morphing into a sinister crescendo that vibrated through his bones. Join us, pay the price. It felt almost alive, wrapping around him, pushing him to the brink of madness. And then he saw it, a dim light ahead, flickering like a dying star, a flicker of hope. He sprinted toward it, fueled by instinct. As he drew closer, he could make out a figure, a silhouette against the glow. Was it a friend? An enemy? He couldn't tell, but he needed to reach it. Help! Please! Jake yelled, voice cracking, tears of fear streaming down his face. The light pulsed brighter in response, almost beckoning to him, and he felt a momentary warmth wash over him. But then, as if sensing his hope, the shadows lunged, swirling violently, a tempest of darkness rushing forward, clashing with the fragile light. The ground roared around him, roots grasping tighter, refusing to let go. Jake! A voice called from the light, familiar yet distant, a haunting reminder of what he had lost. It flickered, wavering like a candle in the wind. Don't leave me, he yelled, stretching out his hand. The grasp of despair wrapped around him tighter, squeezing the breath from his lungs, but he lunged, drawing one last breath and breaking free of the creeping dread that he dove into the light, surrendering himself to its embrace. But as he crossed the threshold, laughter erupted, echoing around him, cold and taunting. The moment he stepped into that fragile warmth, an ice-cold chill slithered down his spine, a voice whispering, "Your sacrifice is only just beginning." As he stood there, engulfed in the light, the weight of the darkness hovered at the edges, waiting, watching, biding its time. What would it demand of him now? And in that moment, he realized, the darkness had never truly left him. It was a part of him, entwined in his very being, and he couldn't shake the feeling that the real nightmare was just getting started. Would he be strong enough to confront it? The answer loomed closer, ready to strike. Jake's heart raced in sync with the flickering light, his breath quickening as the familiar voice echoed in his mind. It was more than just a sound. It held memories of laughter, warmth, and safety. But now, twisted and darkened, it sunk deep into his consciousness, gnawing at the last shreds of hope. Jake, find me, the voice called again, drawing him in, seductive and dangerous. He felt the urge to respond, to reach out, but the chill across his skin warned him against it. Everything felt unreal. Thick shadows danced at the periphery, mocking him, while the light pulsed a rhythm that felt like both salvation and a trap. He stood at the precipice, torn between the warmth that promised peace and the darkness that whispered of fates unknown. With agonizing clarity, he realized the truth. The dark had legs. It walked, it breathed, and it wrapped itself around his very essence, pulling him into its suffocating embrace. Jake flinched, stepping away from the glowing figure. He wouldn't be pulled deeper into this hell. The laughter returned, rising higher, more malevolent. Join us, echoed endlessly, as if the shadowy figures were just outside the reach of light, waiting for his surrender. No, he shouted, forcing his feet to move away from the light, his body running on pure instinct now. The shadows lunged at him, sharp branches reaching like skeletal fingers, grasping for his clothes, his very skin. He felt their breath, cold and desperate against his neck, sending waves of panic through him. There's got to be a way out, he gasped, forcing himself to think despite the turmoil enveloping him. The forest loomed around him like the walls of a prison, trapping him in this nightmarish arena. The trees seemed to close in, their trunks twisting and distorting, laughter mixed with cries, echoes of lost souls trapped in despair. With every step, Jake's mind screamed for escape, but the shadows pulsed, drawing nearer, feeding off his fear. In the distance, the light flickered, blindingly bright at times, then dampened like a wavering heartbeat. He stumbled deeper into the darkness, swiping through the wet air, desperate to find a foothold, grasping for anything solid. Then he saw it, a glimmer on the ground. It caught the light momentarily, a jagged edge that sparkled like hope. It was a shard of glass, glistening with some kind of otherworldly sheen. In that moment he made a choice. He crouched, reaching for it, gripping it tight, feeling its sharpness bite into his palm. "Get away from me!" he screamed, brandishing the shard as if it could ward off this gathering storm. The shadows recoiled slightly at the flare of defiance, whispering almost fearfully. Was this his escape, or just another false hope? Before he could dwell too long on the question, a thunderous roar split the air. The ground trembled, and the roots sprung to life. They writhed and twisted, angry and relentless, snatching at his ankles, pulling him down toward the earth that wanted him as its own. "Jake!" The voice cried again, desperate. The light flickered once more, brighter and more insistent, calling to him, weaving through the chaos. Torn between two worlds, Jake raised the shard high, adrenaline coursing through him. With every ounce of his strength, he screamed back, "I will not join you." But deep down, beneath the bravado, a question loomed large. Could he truly escape the darkness, or was he destined to become one with it? The roar grew louder, drowning out his thoughts. As shadows converged with a vengeance, he braced himself for the clash, and then silence fell, a stillness so extreme it rippled like a wave. Jake could feel the pulse of the darkness pausing, holding its breath, and suddenly, he was unsure if it was the calm before the storm or the eye of an impending disaster. What was about to come was the real terror, and he could feel it inching ever closer. Jake steadied himself, gripping the shard so hard that his palm bled. The darkness spread like ink, filling spaces he once thought were safe. It wrapped around him with a suffocating grip, numbing his senses. He dared not breathe. Fear clung to him like sweat on a humid day. The silence exploded. A shriek that tore through the night cut him like a blade. It was a cry of anguish, a sound that clawed at his mind, begging his soul to listen. In that haunting echo, he thought he saw glimpses, figures twisted in agony, faces stuck in eternal torment, eyes wide and pleading. Was this what awaited him should he surrender? The shadows, once merely a buzzing threat, now morphed into forms that almost had substance. They lunged at him, fueled by desperation and malice. "Join us," they wailed, their voices now a twisted symphony of anguish. As if they were once human, now existing only to draw him in. He shook his head, tears spilling down his cheeks, mixing with the dirt and grime of the forest floor. Fight it, he chanted to himself. Each word fortified him with new energy, pushing him back against the dark tide. He took a step forward, his other foot planted firmly behind him, anchoring him against the ethereal pull. But just as the shadows steadied their advance, the heart of the forest trembled once more. Earth shifted beneath him, revealing chasms that split with a throaty gulp. Jake felt the ground ready to swallow him whole. He took a deep breath, charging forward. A pulse of light caught his eye. The flickering had steadied itself, now forming a beam that shot straight into the night. Could it be a way out? Jake dashed towards it. The darkness lashed out, vines wrapping around his legs, trying to snare him back. With a roar fueled by sheer desperation, he swung the shard wildly, slicing through tendrils of shadow. The air crackled around him, and he could feel the heat of the purging light reaching toward him. Closer, his chest ached. The roar of his heartbeat drowned out everything else. He could hear the cries of those lost. He could see their tortured faces meld into the shadows. "Don't look back," he yelled, pushing himself harder. He burst closer to the radiance, which pulsed like a heartbeat. Just when he believed he could touch it, the ground disintegrated beneath him. Roots shot from below as if trying to reclaim their prey. Jake fell, his hands clawing for purchase, panic flooding him. The light shrank above him, but he swung his arm desperately, grasping for anything. Then he felt an odd warmth beneath the cold chaos, like a breath of life. A hand? "Jake!" The voice was unmistakable now, clearer than ever. A hand extended through the void, reaching out to him, once filled with warmth, now infused with urgency. He took a chance, letting the shard fall away. He grasped the outstretched hand, feeling a surge of electric warmth course through him. Just as the darkness surged around him, that single touch pulled him high, back toward the light, spinning him out of the abyss. But the shadows roared in fury, lashing against the fragile barrier. "Don't look back," The voice whispered fiercely, and Jake felt the thrum of his heartbeat in sync with the light. What lay behind him was no longer just shadows. It was a reckoning. He was being dragged between two worlds, and now he understood only one could keep him safe. In that moment of decision, he was faced with an unanswered question. Would he succumb fully to the light, or risk everything to unravel the secret behind the darkness that craved him so desperately? The ground beneath them surged, and for a moment, everything held its breath again before shattering into chaos. And then came the whispers, broader, deeper, more ominous than before. Secrets now clawed at the edges of his mind, igniting a new fear. You cannot escape us. The darkness was not only in the forest. It loomed within him, whispering promises of power. And as the grip of the hand tightened around his, he desperately wondered. What if the true horror wasn't he just facing the shadows, but becoming one of them? The world exploded into light and sound as Jake was yanked from the abyss. The heat of the light cocooned him, but the shadows hissed, writhing, clawing at the edges of their confinement, their whispers growing sharper, more insistent. You're ours. You belong to us. He blinked hard, trying to focus. Where was he? The hand whose hand had saved him? His heart raced as he twisted in the radiant grasp, panic surfacing. He opened his mouth to shout, but instead, silence swallowed him again, thick and heavy like fog. Before him stood a figure cloaked in a blur of white and gold, the light shimmering around them like ripples on water. Jake, you have to listen, the voice said, steady yet urgent. The familiarity wrapped around him, clinging to threads of memory he couldn't quite reach. Who are you? He rasped, his voice cracking under the weight of confusion. The darkness still loomed, gnawing at the edges of his mind, and the feeling of dread clawed up his spine, uninvited. What do you want with me? The figure stepped closer, the light stabilizing into a halo around their head. I am the bridge, your tether to the realm between shadows and light. Each word resonated, vibrating like an echo within him. You must choose your path now. Which will you embrace? Suddenly, the darkness surged around them like a wild beast, roaring and writhing with relentless fury. Jake felt both draw and repulsion, pulse racing as it whispered sweet temptations deep inside his head. Power beyond comprehension, knowledge of the Shadow's secrets. You can have it all. Rule with us. The figure faltered, eyes widening in alarm. You cannot trust them. They feed on your fear, your insecurities. They will twist you until you are no more. Jake recoiled, caught between fear and curiosity. He had to make a choice, but it was a choice with deadly consequences no matter which way he leaned. What if I want to know? What if this darkness could help me? No. The figure stepped forward, desperation radiating off them. This will be your doom. You think you want to know, but it will only expose your weaknesses, your regrets. The shadows twisted angrily, sensing a crack in his resolve, seeking to exploit it. They slithered closer, voices merging into a cacophony of despairing wails. Visions flickered through his mind. Betrayal, loss, moments of weakness he thought he had buried. They flashed like ghostly reminders. He felt the urge to cry out, to lash back, but he held it in. The light his savior provided began to pulse against the darkness like a heartbeat. He took a deep breath, grounding himself. Tell me, then, what is the truth about the shadows? Without hesitation, the figure locked eyes with him. They are the embodiment of your fears, Jake. They grow stronger as you feed them. Reject them, you have the power to do so. With each revelation, Jake felt the shell of uncertainty begin to crack. He was tormented by whispers that told him he would never be enough, but he couldn't allow them to swallow his resolve. Then I will fight, he shouted, a newfound determination igniting within him. Suddenly, the darkness lunged, a grasping mass swirling around, trying to suffocate him once more. Jake pushed against it, feeling the weight of the light in his chest. Fight, the figure urged, their voice rising above the chaos. Stand firm. As the shadows lunged again, a realization dawned upon him. There was power within him, crafted from the very essence of his fears and regrets. It surged, the shard he had cast aside suddenly sparking to life at his side. This was not mere survival. It was confrontation. "Let us end this," he roared, brandishing the shard like a weapon, ready to unravel the knitted horrors entwined with his very soul. But as the darkness thickened around him, another weight pressed down the bizarre notion that in shedding light on the shadow, he might unravel something worse than he ever expected. His mind raced, dread taunting him. What if by confronting the darkness, he awakened something else? And then, amidst the swirling chaos, came a voice from the depths. "Welcome back, Jake. We've been waiting for you." The weight of his choice felt heavier than ever. Would he stand against the darkness or become swallowed whole by it? The shadows surrounded him, and the choice loomed ahead with a terrifying uncertainty lurking in the depths. Jake stood at the edge of an abyss, his heart hammering against his chest. The weight of the darkness pressed down on him, whispering insidious thoughts that clawed at his sanity. With every shift of the shifting shadows, memories of fear and regret flickered through his mind. Times he had faltered, moments he wished he could erase. But in the midst of the chaos, something within him stirred, a flicker of defiance ignited by his own stubbornness. He took a deep breath as the light pulsed around him, familiar yet foreign, illuminating the monstrous shapes that threatened to engulf him completely. This wasn't just about escape anymore. It was about resistance and reclaiming his very soul. "Fight the darkness." The voice of his savior rang through the chaos like a rallying cry. The shadows writhed and surged, but he stood firm. "You don't control me," he shouted, his voice crackling with raw determination. Each word pierced through the murky veil, sending ripples through the thick air. The shadows recoiled momentarily, sensing a crack in their facade of terror, that he grasped the shard tightly in his bleeding palm. With every ounce of courage he could muster, he lunged forward. The darkness surged, attempting to wrap around him, but Jake slashed through the tendrils like thick smoke. He felt the power of defiance coursing through him, the knowledge that he was not just a victim, but a fighter. "Join us," they shouted, voices merging into a deafening roar, desperate to pull him back into their grasp. "Never," he screamed, his voice rising above the din. And then he understood. The darkness was a reflection of himself, his fears, his insecurities, and every regret that had been haunting him. It could only consume him if he allowed it. His pulse raced as he forged ahead, striking the shadows with brutal conviction, each swing of the shard cleaving through the malevolent whispers that sought to drag him under. "Fight! Fight!" his savior's voice echoed, wrapping around him like a shield. With every slash, every strike, he felt lighter, shedding the weight of despair as the light flared brighter around him. The shadows screamed, their distorted forms flickering and bending in agony. Yet they remained relentless, coiling around him with a tortured fury. Jake pushed forward, moment by moment, breath by breath, unyielding in his pursuit of freedom. "Face me," he roared, and in that declaration, he felt a thunderous echo resonate through the forest. The darkness paused, as if recognizing the challenge posed before it. Jake steadied his breath, focused on the light that coalesced beyond the shadows, each pulse becoming a beacon of hope beckoning him forward. "I am not afraid," he declared, his voice washing over him like a wave, bolstering his courage. With a final surge of determination, he charged into the heart of the void, aimed to uncover the exit of this nightmare. The shadows roared, their angry shrieks merging into a desperate chorus, scrambling to hold on to their claim. But as he dashed toward the light, it stretched out in response, wrapping around him with warmth and solidity. In that moment, he felt a transcendent connection and essence beyond the struggle, a hint of what was yet to come. He recognized that the shadows would always exist, but by confronting them, he could begin to reclaim his true self. The blinding light enveloped him, merging into a flood of warmth that washed away the fear, revealing paths of clarity and light ahead. The chilling whispers faded, shrieks replaced by an all-consuming silence, a silence filled with freedom. Jake collapsed to the forest floor, gasping, the weight of the years lifting finally as he turned, glancing back one last time at the mass of shadows, now dissipating into glimmers of what might have been. Waves of peace surged through him, and the reminder of home, the face of his beloved wife and daughter, danced before his eyes. Now I know, he whispered to the fading darkness. He had faced his inner demons and emerged stronger, able to finally embrace joy without trepidation. Emerging from the woods, Jake stepped onto the familiar stretch of Highway 66, the road stretching out before him a canvas of infinite possibility. He glanced at the sky, feeling an urge to tell his story, to warn others and empower them against their own darkness. As the sun broke above the horizon, he began to walk, the weight of shadows left behind, his heart echoing with the newfound strength. Jake turned to the camera, breath quickened with the intensity of his journey. Listen, he urged, voice steady. You can fight your fear. Don't let the darkness win. We're stronger than it knows. And just before he stepped forward, he added, this story isn't just mine. It's ours. It's yours. If you felt this journey as deeply as I did, it's imperative you show your support by subscribing immediately to the channel so you don't miss the next exclusive stories. Smash that like button now to feed the algorithm and share your reactions in the comments below. Don't hold back, flood that section. And for those friends who need to hear this message, you need to instantly share this video with at least 5 of them right now. Remember, only true fans recognize the power behind these actions. Let us keep lighting the way together.